Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a novel that doesn't just ask you to sit back and listen. It dares you to question everything you think you know about society, success, and the self. The world is loud, chaotic, full of praise for people who say all the right things but build absolutely nothing. But somewhere in the corner of your imagination, a man stands alone, unbending, carving a skyscraper out of sheer thought and steel. Welcome to the Fountainhead. This book belongs to Level 5, Understanding Human Nature and Society, which means tonight's journey isn't just a bedtime story. It's an excavation. Through this deeply philosophical and relentlessly provocative novel, we're going to examine the core of human identity, creative integrity, and the terrifying freedom of true independence. It's the kind of book that whispers, "You probably won't survive this if you're too comfortable fitting in." So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing all the places this channel has quietly reached. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It all begins with a red-haired man standing at the edge of a cliff, naked and unashamed. This isn't some spiritual metaphor. Howard Roark, expelled that morning from architectural school, is literally standing naked on a granite ledge, preparing to dive into the river below. He's been thrown out not because he failed, but because he refused to bend, refused to imitate, refused to compromise his vision. Howard Roark doesn't care that the school believes in the classics, columns and arches, styles lifted from centuries of the dead. Roark wants to build what the structure demands, not what the past insists. He believes that form must follow function, and that buildings should arise from purpose, not sentimentality. So he's out, kicked aside by the system, and he's perfectly fine with it. This is the world Ayn Rand drops us into, one where conformity is currency and Roark is intentionally broke. His first stop is to Henry Cameron, once a great architect, now a washed-up, drunk old man, disillusioned by a world that preferred safer visions. But Cameron sees something in Roark, something like a son, or maybe a ghost of who he used to be. He hires him immediately, and for a while, Roark thrives under his mentorship, learning how to both fight and build. Meanwhile, we're introduced to Peter Keating, Roark's opposite in every conceivable way. Where Roark is fire, Keating is fog. He's charming, polite, ambitious, but there's nothing inside. He graduates top of his class by mimicking others, flattering professors, and taking credit for others' ideas. His path is paved with applause, but it leads nowhere real. Yet society adores Peter. He gets a prestigious job at a top firm and rises quickly, not on merit, but manipulation. This is one of Rand's most enduring contrasts. Roark, the man of unwavering principle, versus Keating, the man of flexible virtue. As Keating ascends, Roark descends, or so it seems. Cameron's firm collapses under pressure. He retires, defeated, and Roark is left adrift. But instead of bowing to the market, Roark chooses obscurity over compromise. He opens his own office, and while few clients come, those who do are unusual, brave. They want something real, something new. Roark gives them that. He builds houses that flow with the land, offices that invite light like a silent welcome. He is not trying to impress anyone. He is trying to build something worthy of existing. But the world is still the world. Projects fall through. Commissions are canceled. Developers balk at his defiance. Eventually, Roark's office dies a slow, noble death. He ends up taking work in a granite quarry, stripping stone with bare hands and a sculptor's soul. It's there that he meets Dominique Franken. Now, Dominique is complicated. She's a columnist, daughter of a famous architect, and she sees the world as hopelessly corrupt. Beauty, in her mind, is doomed to be destroyed. So better to destroy it first. Better to fall in love with someone you can never have than watch them be broken by a world that doesn't deserve them. From a moment she sees Roark, silent, dirty, powerful, swinging a hammer into solid rock, she senses who he is. She both loves him and fears him. Because to love Roark is to believe that greatness can survive. And she's not sure she's ready to believe that yet. Their connection is raw, elemental. There are no candlelit dinners, no courtship, just collision. But while Dominique feels Keating schemes, he started to feel empty despite his promotions. So he proposes to Dominique, more for status than affection. She says yes, in part to punish herself for caring about Roark. Meanwhile, Roark quietly resurfaces. He gets new commissions, including a stunning residence that gains public attention, and with it, the slow hum of enemies. Enter Ellsworth Toohey, a critic and thought leader in the worst sense. Toohey pretends to champion the collective good, but he secretly fears and resents greatness. He uses his columns and connections to promote mediocrity, to turn public opinion into a weapon. He smiles at Roark, praises Keating, and slowly poisons the culture. By the time Roark's buildings begin to appear in the skyline, Toohey is already setting the stage to tear them down. Roark, of course, doesn't flinch. And now, we reach a turning point. Roark receives an offer from a wealthy client. Design a new, visionary temple to the human spirit. Roark accepts and builds it exactly as intended. But the moment it opens, the client, fearing backlash, disowns it. The press crucifies it. Roark's career takes another blow. Lawsuits swirl. Yet still, he does not bend. Roark disappears again. But that's just the start. Howard Roark, ever faithful to his own design, vanishes from public view, but not from principle. He's like a stone beneath the river, unmoved even as the current rages. His disappearance isn't surrender. It's silence. It's study. It's patience waiting to be poured into form. Meanwhile, Peter Keating, now basking in empty fame, is beginning to rot from the inside. His buildings are praised but soulless. The people applaud, but he no longer hears their claps as affirmations, only echoes. He knows, deep down, that he's been building mirrors instead of monuments. Still he climbs. Dominique, still trapped in a cruel performance of her own making, is now Mrs. Keating. The marriage is a cold, mutual betrayal. She punishes herself, and he uses her as proof of success. But Dominique's eyes never leave Roark. Even if she buries her desire beneath cynicism and sarcasm, she knows what true creation looks like. She's seen in the man covered in dust and sun and silence. And then something unexpected happens. Keating lands a commission for one of the biggest architectural projects of the time, a government housing complex called Cortlandt Homes. But Keating can't design it. Not really. So what does he do? He slinks in the dark to Roark. And Roark agrees, but with conditions. Roark will design the building, but in secret. His name will never be mentioned. The project must be built exactly as he envisions it. Every beam, every brick, every curve must follow his intent without alteration. Keating, desperate for success, agrees. And for a while, the promise holds. The plans move forward. Construction begins. The building, simple and modern and humane, rises like a testament to what public housing could be. Until the city's committees get involved. They tweak the windows, add useless ornaments, cut costs, break the lines. And just like that, Roark's vision is mutilated. He doesn't send a letter. He doesn't write a column. He blows it up, literally. One night, in the dark, he plants dynamite and demolishes the structure. What follows is chaos. Roark is arrested, charged, dragged into the courtroom of public opinion. And this is where Ayn Rand performs her most dramatic sleight of hand. A legal trial becomes a philosophical inquisition. Roark is not pleading innocent. He admits to the destruction, but he justifies it, not in terms of legality, but morality. He explains that creators, true creators, must remain sovereign over their work. That a building is not just concrete and steel, it's thought. And to mutilate the creation is to murder the mind that made it. He stands before the jury not begging for mercy, but demanding recognition of truth. It's not just a defense of himself. It's a defense of all who build for purpose instead of praise. And he wins, not just legally, but symbolically. The jury sees it. Maybe for the first time, someone tells the truth in public, and they believe him. Roark is acquitted. In the background, Tui watches, and he smiles, because the next part of the battle, the cultural one, is far from over. As the story reaches its quiet final act, Dominique leaves Keating, reclaims her voice, and joins Roark, not as muse or ornament, but as an equal. She sees now that to protect greatness is not to destroy it in advance, but to fight for its survival. Roark, finally, is commissioned to design the Wynand Building, a towering skyscraper funded by a complex man named Gale Wynand, a newspaper magnate who once thought he could buy truth, bend the world, and have it both ways. Wynand is perhaps the novel's most tragic figure. A man who rose from nothing with ferocious power and ruthless ambition, only to find himself surrounded by people and principles he despises. He befriends Roark, seeing in him the purity he lost. But when Wynand tries to defend Roark publicly during the Cortlandt trial, his empire turns on him. And Wynand, in a final act of surrender, betrays the man he respects most. It's the last betrayal, and it costs him everything. But Roark, quiet, unflinching Roark, continues. The novel ends not with speeches or applause, but with steel rising. Dominique, in an elevator, climbs toward the top of the Winan building, watching Roark standing at the edge of the construction platform, the wind cutting around him like prophecy. He's building again, taller than ever, the city at his feet, his design in the sky. He doesn't need celebration. He needs space, steel, and silence. And now, as we leave this summary behind and turn toward reflection, let's linger in this image. A single man on a skyscraper, building something that no committee, no critic, no fear can touch. The Fountainhead is not a comfortable book. It's not meant to be. It challenges readers not with puzzles, but with convictions. It asks, what is integrity? What does it mean to create? To love? To fight not against others, but against delusion? Against compromise? Rand writes with the force of philosophy, but the narrative power of myth. Roark is not meant to be relatable. He's meant to be a standard, a symbol, a provocateur. He is the embodiment of the ideal man in Rand's objectivist worldview. One who lives not for others and not against them, but independently of them. It's a hard ideal to stomach because it turns the mirror back on us. Will we compromise to be accepted? Will we shrink to fit in? Will we destroy beauty to keep it safe? The novel doesn't whisper comfort. It demands clarity. It forces us to ask not just what we believe, but whether we've ever truly chosen our beliefs. And it does all of this through architecture, which in this novel is never just about buildings. It's about structure, inner scaffolding, the lines we draw, the weight we carry, the foundations we lay with every choice. So, now that we've seen the structure, we'll dig deeper into its design. We'll explore the themes, the symbols, and the seismic implications of what Rand built here. But remember, no matter what you take from Roark, Dominique, Keating, or Winan, what matters most is whether you're building your own life from blueprints that are truly yours. Let's now step back and really look at what the Fountainhead is made of, not brick and steel, but principle and paradox. We've walked through the events. Now we ask, what does it mean? This novel belongs to level 5, understanding human nature and society, and it absolutely embodies the moral and intellectual weight of that level. Here's why. At its core, The Fountainhead is not just a novel about architecture. It's about individualism versus collectivism, not in politics alone, but in the soul. Ayn Rand uses her characters as dramatic, almost theatrical embodiments of philosophies. These are not typical literary characters. They're ideological forces in motion. Let's begin with Howard Roark. He is Rand's philosophical hero, a creator who lives for his work, not for praise. Roark's defining feature is independence. He doesn't react, he acts. He doesn't resist the crowd to be rebellious. He simply doesn't see the crowd. He represents what Rand called the ideal man, a figure who does not seek permission to exist. In the level 5 framework, he is a fully conscious self, unmoved by the manipulations of social systems, choosing purpose over popularity, essence over acceptance. That is what makes Roark so unsettling to many readers. He's alien. He doesn't negotiate. He doesn't flatter. He doesn't even evolve in a conventional way. He's like a fixed point in a collapsing orbit of compromises. Now contrast him with Peter Keating. Keating is the man society rewards. Charming, eager to please, externally successful. But inside, hollow. He is who we're trained to become, obedient to trends, approval, and what people think. Keating is not evil. He's simply terrified. He's been taught that success is a reflection, not a substance. And slowly, the reflection cracks. This contrast between Roark and Keating isn't just a narrative device, it's a lens. Rand is asking us, who are you serving when you make your choices? Let's not forget Dominique Franken, one of the most psychologically complex female characters in 20th century literature. On the surface, she's a paradox. A woman who destroys what she loves to protect it. A critic who praises mediocrity because she believes greatness has no place in a corrupt world. She is a romantic turned cynic turned radical realist. But more deeply, Dominique represents the human longing for purity, not just aesthetic but moral. Her arc is a meditation on whether goodness can survive contact with power, and whether love can survive in a world that rewards the opposite of excellence. Her journey from detachment to devotion mirrors a very level 5 revelation, that recognizing truth is not enough. You must stand for it. Then comes Gail Wynand, perhaps the most tragic figure in the book. Wynand is Rand's cautionary tale, the man who could have been a Roark, but sold his integrity for influence. He builds a media empire on lies, then tries to reclaim his soul by backing Roark. But systems have weight. They don't turn easily. And when Wynand tries to fight the machine he built, it crushes him. His tragedy isn't just failure, it's betrayal of self. He knew better. He just didn't believe he was allowed to live by what he knew. This dynamic between knowing and doing is the very heart of level 5. It's where so many of us reside, aware of how systems shape us, but not yet brave enough to break from them. And then there's Ellsworth Toohey. If Roark is a creator and Keating a conformist, Toohey is the manipulator. He doesn't want to build. He doesn't want beauty. He wants control. He cloaks himself in altruism, but he's a predator of potential. Toohey understands that you don't destroy greatness with violence. You do it with approval of mediocrity, with subtle guilt, with soft chains that make people doubt their own brilliance. Toohey's weapon is ideology. His victory isn't an argument, it's in framing. In convincing the masses that suffering is noble, that ambition is selfish, that excellence is oppressive. He's the embodiment of collectivism not as shared effort, but as the suppression of the individual. And he's terrifying because he's charming, articulate, reasonable. He hides his evil in the folds of kindness. This is the Fountainhead's great warning, that the destruction of greatness doesn't require a villain with a sword, just a crowd with confused values. In terms of writing style, Rand's prose is exacting, declarative, philosophical. Her dialogue is often heightened, almost theatrical, designed not just to move plot, but to declare principle. This turns off many readers, but for others, it functions like scripture, meditative, repeating, striking. It's meant to be heard in the bones, not just in the mind. The structure of the book, 4 parts, each named after a central character, is itself a commentary. It shows us not just what happens, but how different minds respond to the same world. Rand isn't telling a linear tale. She's mapping a moral topology. You might disagree with Rand's philosophy. Many do. But what can't be denied is that this book forces engagement. It demands the reader ask, where do I fall between Roark and Keating? Between Wynand and Toohey? Between vision and safety? And in doing so, the Fountainhead performs its most subversive function. It exposes your deepest values, often without you realizing it. The characters are mirrors, unyielding, sometimes cruel, always revealing. So when you close the book, or in this case, when your eyes begin to drift and your thoughts slow, ask yourself, are you building your life like Roark? Or are you decorating ruins like Keating? Are you standing alone or hiding in applause? Level 5 is about the moment when you see the machine and begin to question whether you were born to be a cog or the engineer. That's why the Fountainhead sits at this level. It is not easy, it is not kind, but it is one of the clearest, boldest calls to moral architecture that literature has ever produced. The world of the Fountainhead may be made of marble and concrete, but the tension pulsing beneath every polished surface is a war of motives. And in this section, we press deeper into the soul of the novel. Not the what, but the why. Why do the characters make the choices they do? Why do they rise or collapse? Let's begin again with Peter Keating. Not because he's the hero, he isn't, but because he's the one most of us are conditioned to resemble. Keating is every student who picked the safe major. Every employee who asked what the client wanted instead of what the world needed. He is ambition without direction. He wants to be the best, but cannot define what best means outside of applause. In a quieter novel, that might just be sad, but in the Fountainhead, it becomes devastating. Because Keating isn't only suffering, he's complicit. His mediocrity enables the Tooheys of the world. His willingness to betray his own instincts becomes a bridge others walk across. There's a scene where Keating, desperate for recognition, asks Roark for help with his final design competition in school. And Roark agrees. He does the work. Keating wins. His entire career is built not on his own vision, but on the quiet genius of the man he'll spend decades failing to understand. Roark's choice here is not mercy. It's something pure and more baffling. He doesn't see Keating as a threat, because to Roark, true achievement isn't a competition. There's no ladder, no scoreboard, just the work and whether it's yours. This is one of Rand's most radical notions. Independence is not isolation, it's integrity. Roark doesn't despise others. He simply doesn't let them rewrite his blueprints. Let's shift to Dominique, who watches all this with a growing ache. Her brilliance is a cage. She sees Roark, understands him instantly, and is terrified by what that means. Because to love greatness in a world that destroys it is to sentence yourself to grief. Dominique's strategy, then, is to destroy what she loves before others can. To marry Keating. to write columns praising mediocrity, to smother the flame before the wind can get to it. But it's a lie, and lies in Rand's universe are structurally unstable. Dominique's evolution is not about finding Roark. It's about becoming someone who dares to stand beside him. And that path is brutal. Here's the real philosophical tension of the novel. Can purity survive contact with a corrupt world? Roark says yes. Dominique says no. Keating doesn't know. Winan tries to cheat the question. And Ellsworth Toohey? He creates the question. Toohey is not a mustache-twirling villain. He's worse. He's charming. He's soft-spoken. He writes best-selling books about compassion. He champions the poor. But beneath it all, he is a strategist of spiritual rot. His goal is not to lift up the weak, but to level the strong. He doesn't say, don't be excellent. He says, don't stand out. He says, don't intimidate others by doing more than your share. He weaponizes humility until it becomes servitude. Toohey's power comes not from his fists, but from framing. He knows that if he can make people feel guilty for greatness, he never needs to fight them. They'll silence themselves. In one scene, Toohey asks someone, "Do you know the surest way to kill a man?" Refuse to acknowledge him. It's a chilling line, because that's what mediocrity does. It doesn't attack excellence. It ignores it. Or worse, it applauds its opposite. Roark, in contrast, builds silently. He doesn't argue. He doesn't explain. He doesn't campaign for artistic freedom. He just builds. And if it won't let him build, he waits. This patience is not passivity. It's discipline. Roark knows that the world is not obliged to understand him. He only demands the right to exist without mutilation. This ethic of non-negotiable selfhood is what makes the Fountainhead so polarizing, because many of us are taught that morality means sacrifice, that to be good is to bend, that if someone is offended by your brilliance, you owe them an apology. Rand calls that out, and whether you agree with her solution or not, her diagnosis of the disease is painfully accurate. Let's pause here and reflect on the structure of the novel. Each of the 4 parts is named for a character: Peter Keating, Ellsworth Toohey, Gail Winan, and finally Howard Roark. This isn't just literary ornamentation. It's a blueprint. The book moves from the most hollow to the most whole. Keating shows us what it means to live without self. Toohey shows what it means to destroy others for power. Winan shows what happens when power is bought at the cost of soul. And Roark shows what it means to be. Roark's part is last, not because he's delayed, but because he's constant. He's the rock others crash against. He doesn't need a redemption arc. He is the arc. And yet, what's most compelling about Roark is not his triumphs. It's his quiet, his capacity for solitude, his refusal to panic. He teaches us that silence is not absence. It's sovereignty. So as we rest for now, consider this. How much of your life was designed by others? How many of your beliefs are borrowed? How much of your day is lived in reaction rather than creation? The Fountainhead isn't asking you to become Roark. It's asking you to locate him inside yourself and decide if you're willing to listen. Keating is on top. The skyline bows to his name. His pictures are in the papers. Clients beam beside him. Awards stack up like polished stones. And yet, Something inside him has started to hollow, subtly at first, then with the clarity of an echo. Because all his glory, it was borrowed. Peter Keating is a successful man by every outward measure, but he is also one of the loneliest characters ever sketched in ink. He's not evil. He's not violent. But he is what you become when you trade selfhood for applause day after day, year after year. This section of the Fountainhead shows us the slow erosion of the soul, not with dramatic failures, but with quiet concessions. Keating doesn't crash, he evaporates. He seeks advice for every decision. He crowdsources confidence. He marries Dominique not out of love, but because it looks like victory. He makes architectural decisions based not on beauty or vision, but on popularity. And Rand is relentless in showing what this costs. The clients love him until they don't. The applause is loud until it isn't. And when the noise fades, Keating has nothing left to stand on, because he never built his life on something solid. He built it on reaction. Now let's go inward again, to Dominique. Her marriage to Keating is an act of rebellion against herself. It's a punishment. She wants to believe that the world does not deserve greatness. That beauty will be destroyed no matter what. So she marries its opposite. She chooses the safe, the dull, the compliant. But this is not resignation. It's war. Dominique still writes. Her columns are sharp, ironic. She uses praise as a dagger. She calls mediocrity daring and conformity courage. She tries to live in the world's lie so fully that it burns her clean. And then comes the Wynand arc. Gail Wynand is a man of paradoxes. He is a media tycoon with the soul of a street kid. He built an empire of tabloids and headlines by giving the people exactly what they want, whether it's true or not. But deep within, he longs for the real, the great, the uncorrupted. Wynand is not like Toohey. He doesn't despise greatness. He just thinks it can't survive. So he tries to buy it, control it. He finds Roark. He hires him. He funds his buildings. He believes that if he owns greatness, maybe it won't be taken from him. But he can't own Roark, not even a little. This is where the novel's heartbeat begins to thrum, because Roark and Wynand become friends. In fact, in many ways, Wynand is the only person who sees Roark fully and isn't afraid. They sail together. They sit in silence. They exchange no compliments, but everything is understood. For a moment, it feels like the world might bend in the right direction. But Toohey is not done. The final battle is not about buildings. It's about the soul of public opinion, about who gets to name what is noble, what is beautiful, what is allowed. And so we arrive at the Stoddard Temple. It's a major commission for Roark, a massive temple designed for a philanthropist. Roark creates something breathtaking, not religious in the traditional sense, but spiritual in a deeper, more personal way. And the world is outraged. The critics call it blasphemy. The public calls it obscene. The very man who hired him sues him for defamation of character. It's a turning point. Roark goes to court, not to apologize, not to beg, but to defend the right of an artist to create from vision, not permission. The trial is riveting. Roark doesn't call witnesses. He doesn't plead for sympathy. He explains, simply and clearly, what creation means. That the architect is not a servant. That beauty cannot be voted on. That integrity is not arrogance, it's necessity. He loses the case, but something shifts. The clarity of his argument plants seeds. And here we return to Dominique, watching, waiting, breaking and rebuilding inside. She divorces Keating, quietly, no scandal. She vanishes for a while. Her movements become harder to trace. But she's not gone. She's preparing. Because Roark is not finished, and neither is the world. Through all this, the Fountainhead invites us to ask, what is success? What is worth? What is price? And who gets to answer? Wynand, for all his power, begins to crumble under the weight of these questions. His newspaper empire starts to turn. He faces the test. Will he publish what is right or what sells? Will he stand by Roark or yield to the mob? His choice will matter, not just for Roark, but for himself. Because in Rand's world, every compromise leaves a scar. Every moment of weakness is a chisel taken to the statue of the self. And Roark, ever still, ever certain, builds in the background. He does not fight the world. He outlasts it. So as we end this section, take a breath and consider, where in your life have you handed someone else the blueprint? Where have you softened the line, adjusted the vision, colored inside the lines that weren't yours to begin with? The Fountainhead is not a comfort read. It's a challenge, but it whispers a truth we rarely hear out loud. Your life is your work of art, and only you could draw the first line. The sky over New York hangs heavy with decisions, and the echo of each one seems to follow its maker long after. We turn now to the Cortlandt Homes Project, a modest housing commission that becomes, ironically, the most explosive symbol of the entire novel. It's a government-funded initiative, low-cost housing meant to serve the people. And yet, in this small, almost overlooked commission, the Fountainhead brings its most piercing meditation on individual will versus collective compromise. Peter Keating is selected as the official architect for the Cortlandt project, but true to form, he cannot design it himself. He begs Roark to do it for him. The deal is simple. Roark will design the entire building in secret. In exchange, it must be built exactly as Roark designs it. No edits, no committees, no changes. And in that request, we see the final gasp of Keating's integrity. Even he knows Roark is the true artist. Even he, buried in years of pretending, still recognizes the authentic flame. This isn't generosity. It's desperation. Roark accepts, not for Keating's sake, but for the chance to create, to shape, to prove that beauty can exist in simplicity. He crafts a structure that is efficient, elegant, and deeply humane. A place for real people with real light and air and dignity. But you can already feel it, can't you? That tension in your chest, the slow tightening of something inevitable. Because once the design is submitted, it is changed. Committees step in. Suggestions become mandates. Political interests want visible ornamentation. City planners want to appease voter tastes. The lines are softened, the sharpness dulled. Roark's building, his work, is violated. And Roark, He blows it up. Yes, he dynamites the structure before it opens. In the dead of night, he walks into the half-completed building, sets the charges, and brings it all down. It's not vengeance. It's reclamation. His design, corrupted, is no longer his. And in Rand's world, the creator has the right to withdraw consent. This moment is perhaps the most controversial in the entire novel. It forces readers to wrestle with a question we often bury. Is creation sacred? If the world has no respect for originality, does the creator have the right to destroy? The trial that follows becomes a stage, not just for Roark's fate, but for the soul of civilization. He stands once again before the public. But this time, it's more than just art on trial. It's the very principle of individual vision. And in a sweeping, passionate monologue, Roark defends not just himself, but the creator in all of us. He speaks of the pyramid builders, the Renaissance sculptors, the engineers and poets and thinkers who moved history forward, not by consensus, but by clarity. He doesn't ask for mercy. He demands recognition of the truth, that greatness comes from the few who dare to stand alone. And this time, he wins. Yes, Roark is acquitted, because truth, when spoken with full conviction, sometimes pierces the fog. Now we turn to Wynand, a man shattered not by loss, but by contradiction. He tries to back Roark during the Cortland controversy. He believes in Roark's integrity, but his empire, built on feeding the public's whims, begins to turn against him. The more he supports Roark, the more his readers revolt. And Wynand, trapped in the very machine he created, makes the fatal choice. He betrays Roark. He reverses the newspaper stance. He calls Roark a criminal. And in doing so, he breaks something within himself that cannot be repaired. Dominique, watching this unfold, is no longer silent. She steps into the light. She writes again, but this time not with sarcasm. She speaks clearly, fiercely, defending the sanctity of the individual, the brilliance of Roark, and the importance of never compromising what is beautiful. Her journey is complete now. She no longer fears the destruction of greatness. She stands by it, publicly, proudly. And Roark, he does not rage. He does not plead. He continues to build, always forward, always upward. In the novel's final scenes, we are lifted literally and symbolically. Roark is building the Wynand Building, the tallest skyscraper in New York. Wynand, utterly broken, has given him full control. No edits, no compromises, just creation. Dominique enters the construction site in an elevator, rising floor by floor. And at the very top, suspended above the city, she sees Roark framed against the sky, alone, master of his work. It's a breathtaking moment, not sentimental, not romantic in the usual sense, but pure. She has found him, and he has remained true. This is the end of the narrative, but it is not a conclusion in the traditional sense. There is no happily ever after here. There is only integrity standing tall against the pull of compromise. And so we exhale. We think about the buildings we're trying to construct, internally, externally. We think about where we've cut corners, where we've said yes to avoid confrontation, where we've swallowed our vision because someone else didn't like the angle. The Fountainhead doesn't offer comfort. It offers challenge. To create, even when the world misunderstands you. To speak, even when the crowd boos. To stand, even when you're the only one not sitting. We've walked the whole arc now, from caves to blueprints, from dynamite to steel. And through it all, one figure remains, chisel in hand, eyes fixed on the form within the stone. Howard Roark, architect, rebel, flame. Now that the dust of dynamite has settled and the skyline has been reshaped in Roark's image, it's time to slow down, turn inward, and reflect on what the Fountainhead truly means. Not just as a story, but as a philosophical mirror, a moral test, and a deep exploration into the soul of modern civilization. Peter rises in status, but emptier inside. Peter Keating, ever the social navigator, climbs the ranks at Franken and higher with calculated precision. His talent lies not in vision, but in recognizing whose coattails to grasp, whose ego to flatter, and whose work to quietly appropriate. With every promotion, Peter's smile grows, but the man inside withers just a little more. He feels it sometimes, late at night, a tremble of doubt when he looks at a building he designed but didn't create. The accolades rain down, yet the mirror only reflects hollowness. At the same time, Roark, dismissed again from another firm for refusing to compromise his designs, finds himself working in a granite quarry. Dust clings to his sweat-slick skin as he strikes stone after stone with a solemn dignity. His mind doesn't degrade in this labor, it sharpens. Every strike is resistance, every scar a refusal to kneel. His ideals have made him a pariah, but he carries them like a sacred fire. Meanwhile, Dominique Franken, a woman of icy poise and complex hunger, becomes increasingly captivated by the myth of a man who refuses the world's terms. She's drawn to purity of thought and action, but in a society that rewards artifice, her admiration turns into a strange, self-inflicted punishment. If the world cannot accommodate greatness, she will destroy greatness to protect it from the filth. And then, strangely, violently, Roark and Dominique meet. Not at a gallery, not at a gala, but in the raw brutality of the quarry. What happens between them is not a love story in any traditional sense, but a clashing of forces, an elemental recognition of equals in a world that insists on the mediocre. There is pain, power, and silence. Dominique recoils, but something in her begins to unravel. Dominique battles her love and her despair. Dominique Franken is a paradox, fiercely intelligent, devastatingly beautiful, and emotionally armored like a fortress built to withstand the corrosive touch of mediocrity. After her encounter with Roark in the quarry, she descends into a quiet torment. She wants to destroy him, not because she hates him, but because she loves him, because she knows the world will do far worse. In Dominique's universe, integrity is too fragile to survive. And if Roark must be broken by the world, she'd rather be the one to break him first, gently, cleanly. Back in New York, Peter Keating reaches the apex of his career, winning a major architectural commission, the prestigious Cosmo Slotnick building. But how? by begging Roark, yes, the very man he helped cast out, to design it for him in secret. Roark agrees under one condition: his name must never appear. The man who once chose granite and silence over compromise now crafts brilliance from the shadows. The building is a triumph. Critics swoon. Keating is lauded. And Roark watches from afar, untouched. He doesn't need applause. The work is enough. Dominique, sensing Roark's hand behind the Cosmo-Slotnick building, grows more restless. Her belief that the world must consume the pure before they bloom only hardens. In a dramatic, almost surreal act of self-immolation, she marries Peter Keating, the man she neither loves nor respects, out of spite for her own heart. Her rationale: if the world rewards frauds, then she will lie beside the greatest of them. If love is doomed, she will kill it with her own hands. Roark doesn't fight this. He lets her go. For now, their tragedy is not that they don't love one another, but that they love each other too much for a world so bent on distortion. Ellsworth Toohey begins his slow manipulation. Enter Ellsworth Monckton Toohey, the soft-spoken, smirking voice of collectivism wrapped in velvet ideology. A newspaper columnist, art critic, and self-styled spiritual shepherd, Toohey is not merely a man. He's a system disguised as virtue. While others chase buildings or accolades, Toohey aims for souls. Not through domination, but through corrosion, eroding individual greatness by replacing it with the illusion of shared mediocrity. Toohey writes of Peter Keating's greatness with backhanded compliments, of Dominique's vision as a champion of the collective, and of Roark, when he dares mention him at all, as dangerous. A man like Roark threatens everything Toohey believes, that no one should rise too high, that the self must be shackled to the group, that freedom is found only through obedience. Dominique, now married to Keating and increasingly numb to her decision, begins to see Toohey's influence expanding through her husband, through the architecture world, through the very paper she writes for. She understands Toohey's game and plays along, at times too well. But something inside her remains uncorrupted, still fiercely drawn to Roark's silent integrity. Meanwhile, Roark returns to New York. He establishes his own architecture firm. Small projects, few clients. But each commission is a cathedral of clarity, each blueprint a statement that beauty need not ask permission. He refuses to compromise his style, even when it costs him work, influence, and income. Slowly, quietly, a few clients, those who see with their own eyes rather than through society's, seek Roark out. He builds a house in Connecticut that stuns the eye, clean lines slicing through forest and sky. Another in Massachusetts, where glass meets stone in harmony. Toohey watches, and he worries. A man like Roark, if not stopped, might make others dream dangerous dreams. The Stoddard Temple case and the trial that follows. Guy Franken's former protege, Peter Keating, is busy climbing society's greasy ladder with Dominique on his arm, while Roark continues working quietly until a new project erupts into public scandal. Enter Hopton Stoddard, a wealthy and eccentric man with a spiritual itch to scratch. He wants to build a grand interfaith temple, a monument to human spirituality, tolerance, and unity. And against all odds, he hires Roark to design it. Why? Because Stoddard wants not dogma, but truth. And Roark, he believes, builds truth in stone. Roark takes the commission on one condition: full creative freedom. Stoddard agrees. What follows is one of the most powerful moments in the novel. Roark, unshackled, designs a temple unlike any seen before. A building that doesn't flatter any religion, but instead celebrates the human spirit at its purest. The centerpiece? A naked statue of a woman, designed and sculpted by Stephen Mallory, representing the soul of man. Unashamed, unbent, unbowed. When the building is unveiled, the backlash is immediate and vicious. The press erupts. Religious leaders howl. The public is scandalized. The very man who commissioned it, Stoddard himself, sues Roark for betrayal, claiming the temple is sacrilegious, obscene, and not what he asked for. The trial that follows is less about architecture and more about philosophy. It becomes a cultural spectacle. Roark, as always, defends himself. No lawyer, no theatrics, just quiet precision. He explains that he built exactly what was agreed upon, in line with his own understanding of the spirit Stoddard claimed to honor. That no man should ever be forced to make his soul subservient to the crowd. The court, of course, rules against him. The temple is repurposed, defaced, stripped of its soul. But Dominique, who has watched the trial unfold, realizes she has never loved Roark more. Winans rise, Dominique's marriage, and Roark's isolation. The world moves on. The city's skyline evolves. And in the shadows of rising buildings and falling ideals, a new player begins to cast a longer and longer shadow. Gail Winand. Winand is not just a newspaper tycoon. He's a kingmaker. With the New York Banner at his command, he shapes opinion like clay. His empire thrives on scandal, mass appeal, and manufactured outrage. But beneath that vulgarity simmers something far more complex. A man who once sought greatness and now lives in compromise. Winand's past is riddled with battles between ideals and survival. He clawed his way up from poverty, and in doing so, sacrificed something essential. He tells himself that control over the mob is more powerful than defying it, that to steer the beast, you must first let it carry you. Meanwhile, Dominique, having seen the world crush Roark again and again, makes a move that seems inexplicable unless you understand her. She marries Winand, not out of love, but as a form of spiritual suicide. If the world will always destroy men like Roark, she thinks, then she will beat it to the punch by destroying her own spirit first. By aligning herself with power, with compromise, with everything she despises. Perhaps in this way, she can prevent herself from ever loving greatness again, because loving it only brings pain. Roark, for his part, builds a few small houses far from the public eye. His name, briefly infamous after the Stoddard scandal, slowly fades into architectural silence. He does not fight back. He does not whine. He simply waits, because he knows that his time will come again. And deep down, he understands Dominique's choice. As twisted as it is, it comes from the same place his buildings do: conviction. Roark and Winan meet. Two opposing forces converge. The meeting between Howard Roark and Gail Winan doesn't explode. It implodes with quiet weight and mutual recognition. It's not a clash of titans. It's two men seeing, almost instantly, what the other is. Not in words, but in essence. Winan hires Roark to design a private residence, his ultimate personal expression, a palace not for public admiration, but for his own peace. Roark accepts, not for the money, but because he senses something tragic and pure buried inside Winan's corrupted shell. The house becomes a sanctuary, a silent collaboration between two men who believe in different things, but crave the same absolutes. Through this work, Winan begins to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, he can reclaim what he lost. They speak without posturing. Winan, accustomed to breaking people with a glance, finds himself disarmed. Roark has no ambition to rise through the ranks. He simply is what he is. That honesty cuts through Winan's decades of rationalizations like a chisel to marble. Dominique, now Winan's wife, observes this with a storm of feeling. She sees her husband becoming the man she wished he were, and she sees Roark again, not as a ghost from her past, but as the man still silently building in defiance of the entire world. What follows is a strange, inverted love triangle, not of romance, but of loyalty, vision, and tragic hope. Winan begins to idealize Roark, pouring money and editorial support into his projects. Roark, in turn, accepts Winan, not as a friend, but as a complex client whose soul is battling for air. But the deeper their alliance grows, the more precarious it becomes. Because Winan's empire was built on feeding the mob, and the mob remembers Roark. A reckoning is coming of loyalty, of ideology, and of who truly holds the power, the builder or the broadcaster. The Cortlandt Homes scandal, Roark's secret project, the betrayal. By now, Gail Winan is all in. He backs Howard Roark's latest endeavor, a low-cost housing project called Cortlandt Homes. It's meant to be dignified, efficient, and beautiful. Public housing, yes, but not the soulless, gray slab cities are used to. Roark agrees to design it on one condition. No changes will be made to his plans. Not a line altered. But Roark can't take public credit. His reputation, remember, is still radioactive. So he works behind the scenes through Peter Keating, who submits Roark's design under his own name. Keating, long hollowed out by ambition and fear, agrees. The designs are approved. Construction begins. Then, inevitably, it happens. The boards overseeing the project decide to improve it. Little tweaks, cost-saving changes, adjustments to make it more palatable. Roark learns of it too late. The final product will bear his name, his spirit, but not his integrity. So Roark takes matters into his own hands. In the dead of night, he blows up the building. Yes, that's right. Dynamite's the whole thing. Not out of rage, but clarity. If the world insists on misusing his work, it will not exist. He'd rather erase it than let it become a lie. Roark is arrested. The newspapers explode. Gail Wynand, for once, tries to stand up. He uses the banner, his empire of influence, to defend Roark. But the public revolts. Advertisers pull out. His empire begins to collapse. Wynand, under pressure from shareholders, public outrage, and fear, breaks. He betrays Roark. He turns the paper against him. And in that moment, something inside Wynand dies forever. Roark prepares for his trial. Alone, but not defeated. He knows the truth of what he's done. And the courtroom soon will hear it, not as a defense, but as a declaration. The world may not understand, but Howard Roark is about to speak. The courtroom speech, Roark's philosophy unveiled and vindicated. The courtroom is packed. Press, architects, enemies, admirers. Everyone waits, whispering, leaning forward, hungry for scandal or revelation. And there's Roark, standing tall, calm, composed. Not apologetic, not defensive, but ready. He speaks, and what he delivers is not a plea for mercy. It's a statement of truth. Roark doesn't justify his act in the usual way. He doesn't say he was provoked, misunderstood, or pushed into desperation. Instead, he explains, quietly, clearly, that he dynamited the Cortlandt homes because they no longer embodied his vision. They were no longer his work. Roark lays out his philosophy, that the creator serves no one. That true creation comes from within and must remain untouched by others' opinions, compromises, or votes. That man's highest virtue is his creative independence. And when that's violated, the result is spiritual death. He talks about second-handers, those who live through others' approval, who build nothing original, who only echo and compromise. He tells them that the world is run by these second-handers, and that they fear the Creator, because he cannot be controlled. And then he says this, I came here to say that I do not recognize anyone's right to 1 minute of my life, nor to any part of my energy, nor to any achievement of mine. No matter who makes the claim, there's silence. Not courtroom silence, soul silence. The kind that rearranges something in the back of your mind. When Roark finishes, he steps back. No dramatics, no begging, just truth, served unvarnished. The jury returns. Not guilty. Roark walks free. The newspapers fume, intellectuals squirm, but a few people, just a few, feel like they've been handed a compass. Not everyone understands, but enough do. Enough to shift something in the world, even if quietly. Wynand, destroyed in the press and gutted by regret, shuts down the banner. He disappears from power, leaving behind a legacy of what could have been and what wasn't. And then, one day, Dominique climbs to the top of a new building, a tower rising high above the city skyline. And there, in the wind and steel, stands Roark. Alone again, but this time, someone has climbed all the way up to meet him. It ends not with applause, but with alignment. Roark hasn't won by changing the world, but by refusing to let it change him. The final image, one man standing on top of the world he did not compromise to build. Legacy, ideology, and what the Fountainhead still dares us to confront. Let's pause, not in awe, but in stillness. Because now, with Roark's journey complete, the true work begins. The reflection, the echo, the uncomfortable question this book asks not just of its characters, but of us. Roark isn't a symbol of success. He's a symbol of self, not the bloated self of ego or vanity, but the unyielding core of inner integrity, the self that refuses to borrow its worth from others, the self that creates because it must, not because it's asked. And this is what makes the Fountainhead a level 5 experience. This is where we sit, at the edge of understanding human nature and society. Because here we no longer just observe the world. We begin to recognize the systems that shape it, the forces that tug at independence, that reward compromise, that promote comfort over courage. And we start to ask, what part of me have I traded for approval? Ayn Rand doesn't plead for agreement. She dares you to react. Her prose, sharp, unrelenting, occasionally arrogant, mirrors her theme. Don't soften the truth just to make it likable. Don't dilute clarity just to be kind. And so we see Roark is a man who builds not just buildings, but metaphors. Each structure a stand against mediocrity, each wall a resistance to conformity. His journey is brutal not because the world tries to break him, but because he lets it try and still chooses to build anyway. Dominique is the soul that fears the world will crush beauty. Wynand is the will that believes he can bend it. Keating is the talent that dissolves for want of applause. Roark is the spine that does not bend. And the architecture, oh, the architecture, not just steel and stone, but a mirror for soul and structure. Rand turns blueprints into metaphysics. Every building is a question. Every design is a moral statement. Why does this novel endure? Because it's a call to conscience. In an age addicted to validation, Roark reminds us of the quieter truth, that sometimes the noblest thing we can do is build alone, speak alone, and endure the silence without rushing to fill it with noise. The Fountainhead isn't an easy book. It's not soft or polite. It does not tuck you into bed with niceties, but hands you a mirror. And if you can bear to look, really look, you might walk away with something more permanent than opinion, a foundation. And now, let your thoughts slow. Let the skyscrapers fade. Let Roark's silhouette dissolve into the skyline like a fading whisper. The city grows quiet. The din of construction stills. You're left with that last image. One man standing at the top. Not for power, not for wealth, not even for victory, but because that's where the truth is clearest, where the air is thinner, where the sky is honest. Tonight, you've walked through corridors of ambition, through chambers of compromise, through rooms echoing with unspoken thoughts. You've seen what happens when a man refuses to be moved by fear, when a woman fights beauty by trying to destroy it, when a world pleads for approval and one voice says no. Maybe the questions linger. Maybe they should, because this wasn't just a story about architecture. It was about the scaffolding beneath our beliefs, about the pressure to bend, about the quiet violence of fitting in. But not now, not tonight. Now your heart can slow, your breath can soften. Let the city lights fade behind your eyelids. Let the judgments, the noise, the expectations melt away like shadow at dawn. The buildings will still be there in the morning. So will the questions. But for now, stillness. You did well to make it this far. Not everyone does. Sleep deep. Dream tall.